Buy Black Podcast, Episode 14. What good is $1.3 trillion if the black community is determined to give it all away? Welcome to Buy Black, the only podcast dedicated to helping you find, connect with, and support black-owned businesses. We're on a mission to bring consumers and business owners together to ignite the global black economy. I'm your host, Gerald Jones, and if you're a black business owner or a socially conscious consumer, you've joined the right community. Ready? Let's get to work.
A lot of black people know me, and their biggest problem with me is that I don't support black businesses. And when I say this is like a hate crime. Like, you don't support black businesses? No, I don't. Then they say like, well, that means you don't like black people. Sure I do, sugar. But all black businesses are not professional enough for me. And I ain't spending money on non-professionalism just because your skin is black. All these black-owned restaurants and opening when the they want to open. And what kills me is they got hours of operation on their door and on their little websites. They say they open from 9 to 9 and they don't open till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Something ain't right. There's no way your restaurant should be closed on your birthday. You should have people working for you on that day. And then black businesses known for running out of How the you run out of crab cakes? Every day. Something would tell you to buy more of that because that's what everybody like. The most up part, the name of the restaurant is called Crab Palace. You think Red Lobster gonna run out of lobster? Huh? I support white businesses. See? This is exactly that I'm talking about. I went to go get some damn crabs today because I'm feeling crabby. And it's a nice day to sit on my porch and eat some damn crabs. Since everybody giving me a hard time about not supporting my own people and I decided to get some crabs from a black-owned business. I called and ordered them, go pick them up. I said, all right, let me get some paper so I can put the crabs on. He told me, I'm sorry, man, we out of paper. I said, all right, cool, I can use newspaper. Let me get some butter so I can dip my crab meat in some butter. He like, I'm sorry, we out of butter too. Y'all can think I'm lying if y'all want it. These are the crabs, I lied to you not. I just made a video about this morning, right? I said, damn, how y'all ain't got no paper or no butter? All y'all got is crabs, huh? Just crabs. He said, yeah, and we only had a little bit of Obey. So if you like extra Obey, I'm sorry. I said, really, nigga? He said, yeah, we just had death in our family, so we just opened back up. That's what I'm talking about. A white motherfucker wouldn't have did that. Death and all, they'd have made sure they stocked up before the funeral.
Man, I am tired, man. I'm tired. Look, guys, I know y'all. I know somebody gonna come on here, and I know y'all gonna preach. But guys, man, it's tough. It is tough. It's tough. Oh my God, it's so tough. It's tough being a black-owned business owner, dealing with us, man, just black folks. And I ain't talking about all the downtrodden, bad stuff. It's just tough, man. It's tough running a business. It's tough even being successful. You know how many black-owned businesses, like, we just don't support each other? Like, one thing goes wrong, and you run to Yelp and tell everybody, this is why I don't support black business. Man, I just get beaten up, man. I just get beaten up, and we just get so, like, if something goes wrong with a caterer, right? If you have a black caterer or a black photographer or a black, you know, I'm using myself an example through hospitality. If something goes wrong with a black caterer, you know what we say? We always say, this is why I don't support black business. But if you use the Jewish caterer or a Spanish caterer or a white caterer or any other ethnicity caterer, you never say, this is why I don't use white caterers, but you just get another caterer. We regulate all black businesses off the business that we have from the experience of one black business. But guys, that's not all the businesses out there. You can't judge me because you had a bad experience with somebody at the DMV. That has nothing to do with my business. Now, as a culture and as a people, it's tough because I don't really think that, you know, guys, I have made tremendous mistakes, a lot of mistakes, a lot of stuff I knew was wrong. But God, I'm doing something. I didn't go to business school, you know, and common sense is common. But yeah, but God, a lot of us we're just starting out. We need mentorship. We need help.
Hey guys, welcome to another great episode of Buy Black, your only podcast dedicated to helping you find, connect with, and support Black-owned businesses. It is me, your host, Gerald Jones, and today I am in a really good mood. I had a really great week last week. I was at a conference in Georgia It was all about innovation. It was all about great ideas, new ideas, how to use a startup mentality in order to improve projects and businesses. It was an incredible week. One of the best things about it was because I travel so much, when I went to rent my car, I got a nice, wonderful free upgrade. It was Augusta, Georgia, 75 to 80 degrees every single day, bright and sunny. And they gave me this beautiful BMW convertible. And man, I'm telling you, the top was down every single day. As soon as I got out of the conference, I was in that car. I didn't even care if I had nowhere to go. I was riding with the top down. It was nice and warm. I was loving it. And then I get back home to Omaha, and it was 25 degrees. But we're not going to talk about what's happening this weekend. Last week was great. I'm still riding on that high. But today, the topic that jumped out at me to talk about for this episode of Buy Black Podcast, it actually came to me earlier today. I got up, and one of the first things that I saw on my Facebook page was the video that I just played you guys the audio from. So actually a friend of the program, Jamil Robinson, who you remember from episode 10 with Phoenix Deep Rooted, it was a video that she posted on her page. I saw it, I copied it, shared it to my page. And I'd already seen the video before, at least the first half of it. The part with Jess Hilarious is what she goes by, the comedian that she makes a lot of videos on social media. She got a pretty big following. So she was the person who you hear in the first half of that video kind of being the frustrated Black consumer. I don't know much about her. I don't know if that was just, a part that she was doing or if that's actually how she feels. Either way, it's completely justifiable. On the backside of it, I don't know who that Black business owner was, but his frustration at the same time is also 100% real and justifiable. And it's something that we deal with every single day. So with that, I wanted to use this episode to kind of dig into this problem that we have, this crazy dichotomy that we have going on, where on the one side, you have people who are pushing for us to focus on supporting Black-owned businesses and starting Black-owned businesses and having business-to-business support, business-to-consumer support, consumer-to-business support, and having us all kind of focus on collectively increasing our economic power through business ownership. And on the flip side to that, you have people who, on the entrepreneurial side, just believe that it's impossible to start a business and be successful. And on the consumer side, who have just completely written off supporting a Black-owned business, whether they've ever done business with one or not. So with all of that kind of surrounding our economic reality in the United States, it's something that we deal with, but we rarely ever speak of directly. So I wanted to use this episode to kind of talk directly to it, and really to this myth that we have. We have $1.2 trillion, $1.3 trillion in spending power. And that's something that Black people kind of throw out there as almost like it's a badge of honor, right? Like we've got more power than we give ourselves credit for. We got 1.3 trillion in spending power. But that's a huge myth, right? That's a flawed way of thinking, because ultimately all you're saying is that we spend more of our money that we get in than other demographics do. We spend more of it than other demographics do. So where's the power in that? Because if you look at the money that we're making and then money that, say, the Asian community is making, or the Hispanic community is making, or the white community is making, more of their money is being put into investments, is being put into savings, is being put into starting, building, and growing businesses, is being put into purchasing real estate, things that appreciate, right? Like if you think back to, I know Tyrese has lost his mind these days, but if you think back to Baby Boy and Ving Rhames giving him that lecture talking about guns and butter, we are constantly, as a Black community, throwing our money at the butter, and it just melts right in front of us. We spend so much. Meanwhile, all the other demographics are putting all their money into investments, into the guns, if you will, the things that are going to appreciate and grow wealth over generations. And when you look at that and you think about that, being proud of our ability to spend more money than anybody else and
influence culture more than anybody else really doesn't mean much, because all that does is let all these other groups who have way more invested, way more ownership in this nation, it just puts them in a position to be able to take everything that we influence, appropriate it for their own, and actually enjoy it, because they're not living paycheck to paycheck like we are, because they've got businesses and real estate and properties that they can pass down to their further generations. Meanwhile, we're sitting over here bragging about how much money we spend, but not starting businesses and keeping our businesses going and growing wealth and buying property in our community. It's a failure. It is a huge failure. There's no other way to talk about it. But in that, just like everything else, it's not a failure because there is something wrong with us intrinsically as Black people. It's a failure because it was designed for us to fail this way. Everything about this country was designed to put us in a position where we would fail this way. And so what I want to do today is I've got 4 articles that I want to read. And the reason I chose these 4 articles is because there's so many different elements of this argument, of this conversation that I want to represent, but I can't think of all of them myself. But I can definitely find an article that's well written by somebody else that kind of expresses what's in my mind, and I'll throw my commentary into each one of them. But ultimately, these 4 articles that I found, they will give a really good picture of what I believe is going on in our society, especially as a Black community, and our inability to get over this hurdle of silently boycotting our own economy. So we'll go article by article by article by article. If I have a little commentary to throw in, I'll do it either within the article or after each one. But ultimately, I just want to get these thoughts out. And yes, I'm using somebody else's words to get the thoughts out, but everybody gets full accreditation, and you guys will also get links in the episode description to go and find these people, these articles yourself if you want to read them on your own. But with that, so the 4 articles that I'm going to read today. So one is, was integration a good thing for Black people? The next one is going to be 11 realities faced by Black-owned businesses. And then there's an article written called The Problem with Supporting Black-Owned Businesses and How We Can Fix It. And then the last one is, if you're a Black business owner, this one gets me every single time I read the title. This one is called, If You're a Black Business Owner Who Wants to Succeed, Leave the African American Consumer Behind. And this one touches me in a way because it's very frustrating, but at the same time, it's hard to argue against. So we'll just take a few minutes today. We're going to read through these articles. We're going to learn a little bit. We're going to think a little bit, and then we'll get out of here. All right, so starting it off with the first one. Was integration a good thing for Black people? Probably not. This was an article written March 12th of 2013 by Dr. Boyce Watkins, who I'm a huge fan of his. I love his economic mentality. I love the way that he teaches about economics. And so valid source from my opinion. But so this is actually an article that was posted on AfricanGlobe.com. Or I'm sorry, AfricanGlobe.net. All right, so digging in. This week, I took a visit to Atlanta and once again stopped by the birth home of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I reached back into the life of Dr. King to understand what made him great and what we must do to continue the extraordinary work that he and his colleagues began so many years ago. As I sat on his porch, I closed my eyes and imagined his mother carrying him to the front door. I wondered how many Sundays the family sat on the same porch after dinner, and how many days Dr. King spent wondering if it might be possible for him to fulfill his dreams and personal ambitions. I also thought about integration. I carefully studied the old pictures of Auburn Street, where Dr. King was born. I saw images of proud Black business owners in their finest clothes, driving fancy cars. Of course, not everyone was doing well, but we were certainly better at making our own money. I read about how Martin Luther King Sr., Dr. King's father, maintained a disciplined household where education was the highest priority and protecting the family unit was paramount. Most importantly, I walked away convinced that one of the most valuable things that Dr. King's father gave him was pride. Martin Luther King Sr. taught his son at an early age that inequality was entirely unacceptable and that the terms of integration should be such that you are able to engage in fair trade without allowing yourself to be subjugated. So years later, we have achieved at least half of Dr. King's dream of integration. We can shop where we want, eat where we want, and get almost any job at the big fancy corporation down the street. Many of us earn more money than we could have in a segregated society and are given opportunities that are more consistent with our chosen skill sets. So next section, was integration a mistake? The problem for our community, I humbly submit, is that we did not properly negotiate the terms of our integration. The pride that Dr. King's father instilled in him is lost for millions of youth who are being educated by people who don't care about them. Integration, for the most part, was simply prolonged assimilation, like moving into someone else's home and giving up the keys to your own. You are happy to be moving into a bigger house, but soon realize that you can't go into someone else's house and move around the furniture. Also, while you're renting a room, they are paying the mortgage, which means that their kids, not yours, are going to own the house when all the hard work is done. Many of us see the golden carrot of a higher salary without understanding the risk that is inherent in allowing your family to depend on the descendants of your historical oppressors. Even the most educated among us are raised to sell our services to bidders who extract our best and brightest like oil being lifted from the soil of Nigeria. People with six-figure jobs are living paycheck to paycheck, further heightening the economic dependency that makes you impotent when it's time to stand up for your rights. Like an intelligent woman who marries a wealthy man, you must ensure that you still have something to hold on to in the event that your relationship turns into an abusive one. Sadly, however, many of us have thrown economic caution to the wind. I argue that integration didn't work in our favor because there is a difference between giving up a portion of your economic sovereignty in exchange for a true partnership versus giving up nearly everything to allow yourself to become an occupied state. For example, if I were to give up my business and integrate myself into the management of a large company, I would probably be a very different and more highly paid man from the one you are hearing from right now. In fact, I'd probably be speaking a different political language altogether because few majority white institutions would allow me to speak the way that I do in public. Just ask Syracuse University, where I put my academic freedom to the test. So, the conclusion is not that integration is always a bad thing. Integration can be a wonderful thing. Since white Americans have hoarded most of the nation's resources due to our oppression, and integration gives us an opportunity to have a piece of the American pie. But integrating in such a way that makes you dependent on others can put your socioeconomic security at risk. Years after achieving the dream of integration, we have seen our poisoned and misguided financial chickens coming home to roost. When the 2008 economic crisis hit America, whites took a small hit and soon recovered, but black wealth dropped by over half. Black unemployment hit levels that we haven't seen in over 30 years. The young men who should be heading our families are filling up the jails and prisons, and our public schools have become prisons with training wheels. There is nothing pretty about this form of integration, where even our best, brightest, and strongest are in no position to help those of us who are struggling. The fact is that we must critically assess the extraordinary work of Dr. Martin Luther King while simultaneously realizing that his work was not complete. He died at the young age of 39 years old and was speaking boldly about the importance of economic sustainability as a critical component to achieving true equality in a capitalist society. As a finance professor myself, I am hopeful that we realize that this was probably the most significant part of Dr. King's vision, and that it is the conscientious and intelligent allocation of economic resources that ultimately serves as the key to many of our most fundamental rights as an American. As a community, each of us has a responsibility to teach our children entrepreneurship as an important part of their long-term economic survival. Learning to run your own business is as important as knowing how to grow your own food. We must embrace educational excellence as if our lives depended on it, but ensure that our children are taught Black history and family values that they are not getting in class. We must target our spending to Black-owned businesses whenever we can and embrace the importance of saving, investing, and ownership. Finally, since many of us spent $200 last month at Walmart without blinking, this means that we can certainly afford to give $15 to our favorite Black-owned organization. It's time for a new way of thinking as it pertains to money and education. Ownership, wealth building, and self-sufficiency should be part of the consistent Black national discourse. By reinventing ourselves in a productive way, we can turn our darkest hour into one of the greatest periods in Black American history. The time for us to do this is now. And again, that was from Dr. Boyce Watkins, who you can find at boycewatkins.com. So just a few things from that article. This really ties into a lot of my personal belief system when it comes to the effects of integration. You know, when I talk to people, I say a lot, you know, I admire Dr. King, but I'm a fan of Malcolm X. And I was a huge fan of Malcolm X mainly because of his platform of self-sufficiency and taking care of the Black family, Black women, Black children, and our right and responsibility to protect ourselves and our community. That is what speaks most to me. It is the message that Malcolm X had. We should look first internally and say, who can I help? Who can I support? Who can I uplift? That's just my personal opinion. I don't have any problem with any other group of people, right? Anywhere. But every other group of people on this earth, whether it's spoken or unspoken, looks first to the people who are like them in order to provide support. It's just a natural human behavior. You know, we look to the people who are most like us because that's who we're most comfortable with. And so other groups support each other first, defend each other first, take care of each other first. And Black people don't. And again, that's not an intrinsic thing about us that's inferior. It's a way that we were literally conditioned to function in order to proliferate slavery. We were taught not to help each other, not to support each other, not to trust each other. And that mentality continues today. So I am very much in the Malcolm camp of we need to learn to love ourselves before we can ever talk about how we fit into American society. Because right now we don't. Right now in the United States, if you're going to be Black, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to be marginalized intentionally because you don't want to get away from comfort. You don't want to get away from the other Black people that you grew up with. And so because you want to stay where it's comfortable, you will stay in a place where you have been marginalized purposefully through programs like redlining and many others. This nation wants us to be off to the side where nobody can see us, silent and broke. And so you either stay there where it's comfortable and you become marginalized, or the other side to it is you leave the comfort of the Black community where you grew up and you go and you assimilate into the rest of American society. And whatever dialect you had growing up, you drop it. Whatever way of clothing, types of clothing that you wore growing up, you change it. You change the way you walk, that change the way you talk, that change the way that you interact with the world in order to put on a less threatening, less Black face, right? And so you assimilate and you go and you live and you work and you exist in a completely different world where you're basically constantly putting on the face that makes everybody comfortable. And I'm speaking to me right now, right? That's the world that I live in. And those are really the two options. The third option is one that's really just rising up recently, where you have this kind of resurgence of Black identity, Black excellence, love of who we are, what our culture is, and an expression of success and education in being Black. And even today, as that, we'll call it a resurgence, is happening, it's being met in mainstream media and in politics and on the internet with all different forms of calling that pride racism or reverse racism. So still trying to marginalize educated, proud Black people. So that's our reality. That's what we're in. But back in the day, back before the Civil Rights Movement, you really only had one option. You had the option of you live in the Black community with Black people. and you buy from black-owned businesses because that's the only place where you're allowed to be. So during that time period, the real only problem that we had was that there was blatant racism, violent, murderous, burn down all your homes and businesses racism that we faced. Without all of that, had we had our own communities like we did, our own businesses like we did, and there wasn't this overt, violent racism that rose up against us every time that we moved up a teeny tiny inch, everything would have been just fine. Everything was good. So I don't see why here in 2017, when the overt racism and the violent racism openly in the streets, when that has been legally squashed, why we can't look to ourselves again and say, this is a time where we need to take ownership of our economic future. The same way that we had ownership of our economy before the civil rights movement, we need to go back and we need to take ownership of our economy again now. In this integrated society, we need to look to every other group and see how they thrive economically. And they do it by supporting businesses in their own communities first. And then they support other businesses outside the community. And if it's good enough to work for every other demographic, it will work for black people too. Nobody's saying only buy black. Nobody's saying shut us off from the entire world. But the mentality of there is more value in being able to buy from a company that's not owned by black people than there is in being able to buy from a company that is owned by black people. That is a slave mentality. That is a taught mentality. We know this because there's no other group in the United States who has that mentality but us. When you look at mannerisms and behaviors and thought processes that are counterproductive to self, that the black community displays, that no other community displays, when you see those things, the first thing you should do is think, where did that come from? You should do some research to figure out, when did we start thinking this way? When did we start acting this way? What movements were taken against us in order to put this into our brains or into our way of living? Because I guarantee you will be able to find it somewhere between today and 1619 on this continent. Guarantee it. So that is kind of the emotion that comes to me from that first article. So understanding that we abandoned our black-owned businesses basically after the civil rights movement was over and integration happened. Now we're in a situation 3 generations later where all that business acumen is gone. All of those skills have atrophied. We were taught to only work for other people. And so now that we're trying to reinvigorate black entrepreneurship, reinvigorate black ownership of businesses, we're facing a lot of problems that, again, other communities are not facing. So this next article, 11 Realities Faced by Black-Owned Businesses. This one is actually written by Raquel Harris. It's posted to rollingout.com and it was posted May 1st, 2017. 11 Realities Faced by Black-Owned Businesses. You know how your cousins are. Sound familiar? You have either heard or said this about a janky product or poor customer service at a black-owned business. All businesses encounter common issues, but the impact is greater for black-owned businesses. Our history is filled with the reality of facing stereotypes, unfair biases, and unethical and illegal practices. Growth continues, but numbers and profits still lag behind businesses owned by other races. White-owned companies account for 81% of U.S. businesses, while Asian and Hispanic-owned are at 9.7% and 5.8% respectively. Here are 11 common realities that black-owned businesses encounter. Number 1, hiding your race. Experts agree smart and strategic marketing grabs and keeps customers. The internet grants instant access to a company's background, and oftentimes customers' decisions are affected by their implicit biases. Many black business owners choose to hide their identity in order to garner widespread appeal. Pepper Miller, president of the Hunter Miller Group, market research and strategic planning firm in Chicago, said she understands some decisions to downplay black ownership. There's a perception that black people can only do black stuff. It ain't pretty, but it's the truth, said Miller. It's called racism. As much as we want to feel like we're not dealing with that, we are. Number 2, fear of being a sellout. Heavy is the crown worn by Black-owned businesses, especially those located in the hood. When a Black-owned business is perceived as a sellout, it risks losing the respect and support of its customers and peers. Shea Moisture's recent advertising snafu is proof that folks will pounce on any deviation from catering to your target market. Pragmatic Black business owners figure out how to keep both their current and potential customers happy because they balance building and maintaining diverse relationships. Number 3, fractured finances. Black-owned businesses often falter because they lack the capital needed to start and operate their businesses. Lack of capital can hinder a Black-owned business from investing in their own business at a level that will produce an optimal return on investment. Seeking small business loans is a challenge because of higher interest rates. Entrepreneurs face increased pressure because they don't have a 9-to-5 to supplement when their profits are low. Number 4, lack of consistent and unconditional support. Lack of support from Black customers and other Black-owned businesses is one of the harshest realities. Other races support their own as part of their lifestyle. It's already understood. But Black businesses have to actively campaign for financial and emotional support. Number 5, meeting unrealistic expectations. Customers swiftly diss a Black-owned business when they mess up. The "you have to work harder than everybody else" mentality leaves Black-owned businesses vulnerable. Businesses owned by other races don't face the same level of scrutiny and criticism. Number 6, ignorance about effective business practices. Business is a language that comes with a distinct learning curve. You don't know what you don't know until you find out. Learning and understanding how to transition from hustle or hobby to legitimate business is a process that takes time for research, planning, and execution. And that one really ties into, those last lines of frustration from the video earlier. And the guy was just saying, many of us are just starting in this, we didn't go to business school, we need mentorship. We need help. We need something other than just, you gave me bad service one time, so I'm done with all Black businesses, right? So I really get that. Was this number 6? Number 6, all money ain't good money. Black business owners report that Black customers are notorious for wanting a hookup, and they are slow to pay outstanding invoices. Discounts are great if offered, but they shouldn't be expected. It's frustrating when customers complain that a Black-owned business's prices are too high, only to end up paying a non-minority-owned business just as much money or more. Number 7, questioning of product and service integrity. It's sad when customers are surprised by the professionalism and exceptional customer service of a Black-owned business. They're viewed as inferior, while big-name brands who may not offer the same dedication and quality receive trust simply because of their name. Number 8, belief in our value. Ever since our forced migration to America, society has told us that we don't deserve to be our own bosses. Inexperienced business owners are hungry, and customers will exploit it if allowed. We do ourselves a disservice when we charge less than we deserve for our products and services. Doing favors without proper compensation diminishes a Black-owned business's value. Number 9, competing instead of collaborating. There are plenty of blessings out there for everyone, but we are taught to feel threatened by our competition. It's essential to be aware of your competition, but bypassing opportunities to collaborate is a mistake. Teamwork makes the dream work is cliche, but it's true. An African proverb states that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. Black-owned businesses who embrace this concept can attest to how it has increased their success. And then this one must be number 11 rather than number 10, which means I skipped a number. It's cool. But number 11, emulating the stereotypes. To be fair, many Black-owned businesses contribute to the realities that plague them. Poor communication and customer service, lack of professionalism, and subpar products make it hard for those who are on their A game. The running joke about CP time is played out. Black-owned businesses need to stay on point if they want to thrive. The success of Black-owned businesses is a key element to building our own economic infrastructure. This will lead to the improvement of our communities and an increase in our political influence. Black people are not inferior, and neither are our businesses. We must instill this mentality early so it becomes second nature to future generations. It starts with teaching our youth to not only seek out and support Black-owned businesses, but also to create their own. Planning and preparation lead to preservation. Notice here, 2 articles in a row in the exact same way. We have to teach entrepreneurship to our kids. we are already adults. We are already kind of set in our ways. It's really hard, like say myself at the age of 35, to say, you know what? I'm really great at working for other people, but I'm going to make this thing happen for myself. It's hard to make that leap. And there's a lot to learn in a very short period of time. But if we start teaching our kids as soon as if they're old enough to start solving any problem, and I mean, what is that? 2 years old, 3 years old? As soon as they're old enough to start solving problems, we need to start teaching them how to solve economic problems. We need to start teaching them how to look for opportunities in their environment where they can create things that didn't exist before, where they can build things that they can sell, right? We need to teach them how to be opportunity seekers. All right, so there's articles 1, article number 2. These next 2 articles are a little bit painful, but again, it's just truth. So this article is called Buy Black: The Problem with Supporting Black-Owned Businesses and How We Can Fix It. This one was written in August of 2016 by Tiffany Drayton, and this one comes from the perspective of a Black consumer who is frustrated with trying to work with Black-owned businesses. So we'll jump into this one. There's a growing movement to support Black-owned businesses that has inspired many a Black folk to jump on the Black business-only bandwagon. From reports that a Black woman sold out of school supplies specifically geared towards Black children, which that was actually Nika Brown Massey, who we had featured on episode 3 with Innovative Supplies Worldwide Incorporated. So not just reports, that actually happened. Congratulations, Nika. But let's get back on topic. From reports that a Black woman sold out of school supplies specifically geared towards Black children to the creation of a Google Chrome app to help Black people find Black-owned business, the movement is pretty hard to miss, and it comes at a perfect time. According to BlackDemographics.com, Black-owned businesses in the United States increased 34.5% between 2007 and 2012, totaling 2.6 million Black firms. More than 95% of these businesses are mostly sole proprietorship or partnerships, which have no paid employees. I have my anti-bandwagonist inclinations, but this was one trend I was excited to partake in. As a 26-year-old Black woman concerned with the Black wealth gap and the various forms of economic inequality people of color face, I know and understand there can be no successful Black fight for equality while we are busy pouring our hard-earned dollars into the businesses owned by other ethnicities. Despite what many tried to argue, money doesn't trickle down from rich to poor, and it most certainly does not trickle down from white or any other ethnicity to Black. Just ask the ancestors, they know. So I have made it my duty to support as many Black businesses as possible. The only problem with this? Well, multiple studies have found that Black-owned businesses have lower profits and higher closure rates than those owned by whites. For most outcomes, these disparities are large. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, for example, white-owned firms have average annual sales of $439,579, compared with only $74,018 for Black-owned firms. I've run into this particular conundrum as a Black woman before, and once again quite recently, when trying to support Black businesses with my dollars. I run a free summer tennis program for Black and Latino kids, typically funded by friends who are gracious enough to throw some coins in my direction in support of my effort. With these coins, I typically purchase equipment, tennis rackets, balls, cones, etc., snacks for the kids, and I am able to have a party at the end of the year or take them on a trip. This year, I decided it would be great if the program finally had a logo to put on some t-shirts for the kids for our party or trip. What a great opportunity to support a Black artist, I thought to myself. Only days prior, a Facebook friend who happens to be a phenomenal artist whose work reflects Black beauty and empowerment posted a status on Facebook lamenting the fact that Black people don't support Black art. I loved his art, so I figured it would be a win-win situation. I'd throw the artist some of my hard-raised coins, and he, in return, would provide me with a logo that reflected the Black kids I work with. I wanted froze and tennis balls on the same logo. Of course, a Black artist would best deliver on that request. Excitedly, I made the payment and awaited the logo. I'll have it ready for you by the end of the week, the artist promised upon receipt of the money. 2 weeks passed. Still no logo. Oh, hey, I already finished it, he assured when I gave him a call to check up on the status of the work. I'll send it to you at the end of the day. Another 2 weeks passed. Still no logo. Sorry, things have been hectic for me, he explained when I contacted him once more. I'll have it to you by the end of the day. Suffice it to say, I never received the logo. Eventually, I just asked for my money back. Okay, he replied, and issued me a refund in 3 parts. When we finally got the chance to speak at length, he explained to me that he was under financial strain and simply not able to think straight. He was breaking up with his girlfriend, he didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, he was confused and simply not in the right frame of mind to produce what I paid him for. I imagine all these claims to be true, however none of them change the fact that my tennis camp kids will not have shirts this year, or that he did not deliver the product I paid for. That was not the first time I was subjected to subpar service or product from a black business owner, and I imagine it would not be the last. As a writer, it was difficult for me to commit to writing for only black-owned websites, because finances can sometimes be a problem, so getting paid becomes a problem. White websites were also typically better organized because they were owned by major conglomerates that could afford bigger staffs. I watched a girlfriend struggle to start a jewelry business, which ultimately failed because of money issues, and it took her forever to get her customers refunds. This, however, is not to paint black businesses as subpar compared to any other. There are tons of amazing businesses that provide fantastic products and services, and that cannot be discounted. Black people are just as capable as any other demographic of producing phenomenal products. Still, black people are under unique, strenuous circumstances that can sometimes be an impediment to smoothly running a business. As a consumer, and even sometimes an employee, that poses a problem and risk. For this reason, the community aspect of business needs to thrive if black businesses are going to. As consumers, we need to view investment in black business as investment in an extension of ourselves, investment in the advancement of black people as a whole. Many consumers seeking out black-owned businesses already do. That is why we go out of our way to offer support with our dollars, even when other options are more easily available. We also should extend more flexibility to black business owners because it can sometimes be real out there. That consumer commitment and investment needs to be met with equal wholeheartedness by business owners, even in the event that financial or other difficulties make it hard. In a global economic system, every black dollar is important, but there is still something more important than the black dollar, the black family, which we are all a part of and intricately connected to. If consumers were viewed more as a family than as consumers alone, much of the problematic interaction between the two could be curtailed. Like, for example, if the black artist was upfront about the circumstances making it hard to deliver on the project and not pretended like everything was good until I could no longer even use the product I paid for, I wouldn't have felt so salty about the entire ordeal. If he viewed me and the kids I served with the tennis camp as an extension of himself and his family, perhaps things would have gone down quite differently. I imagine they would have. All black businesses cannot be perfect, because black people are not in perfect circumstances in this country that has made it a duty to oppress us. Nevertheless, we have a duty to support one another with our dollars, but that support must be respected and reciprocated in the form of honesty, integrity, and respect. Now, I understand exactly where she's coming from. When you've had some unique and frustrating interactions with businesses and with business owners, it can be difficult to continue providing that support. I commend this author for continuing to support black-owned businesses and even doing the next step, giving constructive criticism, because that's what we need, right? That's exactly what the gentleman inside the video was saying earlier. We don't need you to just immediately write us off. If you know something we don't know, we need that help. If you know something that we don't know, we need that support, that mentorship, right? We need people to help us grow. And so I commend the author of this article for not only pointing out the problems and the issues that she dealt with, but providing some guidance and support and feedback for, hey, here's how you can do better. Here's how we can do better. As a consumer, I don't think you can ask for much more than that, right? But as we all know, there's also a big movement within the consumer market, like what we heard in the video earlier, the first half of that video, which is just, I just don't mess with black-owned businesses. And that mentality, however pervasive or not that it may be, it can cause black business owners to get jaded and not want to deal with black customers. So This last article is one that, reading it really upset me. It upset me because, if I'm going to start a business, if I'm a Black person, I'm going to start a business. And my first thought is, well, let me not try to support the Black community because they're not going to support me. So let me just write them off. Like, that's really depressing to me. I don't like that thought process. But at the same time, as I read the article, I was like, well, yep. Yeah, that makes total sense. Oh my God. It's too real, the sentiment that's in this article about the way that the Black community treats Black-owned businesses. And this author, her name is Khadija Nassif. She makes a lot of comparisons in her article about how Black consumers treat Black businesses, comparing it to how Black men treat Black women. And I find it really, really hard to disagree with her logic in this, which is what makes it so very frustrating to have to read it. But it's real. It's something that we've got to face if we're ever going to overcome this cancer that we have in our community that keeps consumers and business owners apart. We have to just face it down and call it what it is, and then make a decision that we're going to change it. So with that, I'm going to read you guys this article. It's called, "If You're a Black Business Owner Who Wants to Succeed, Leave the African American Consumer Behind." All right, so it starts, "An open letter to aspiring African American business owners. With this post, I'm talking to other aspiring and current African American business owners. Even if you're not in a position to comment and publicly discuss your views, please consider the points raised by this post. I want you to succeed and prosper in your business. I'm concerned about you and the other very few African Americans who are brave enough to start their own businesses. I'm concerned because I see some flawed assumptions in people's business strategies, flawed assumptions that can unnecessarily cause you to lose every penny that you're investing into your business. One major flaw is that too many aspiring African American business owners blindly assume that they can structure their businesses around African American consumers. This generally does not work. Even when it works to some degree, Black business owners create extra difficulties and headaches for themselves when they try to service Black consumers. I would invite all aspiring Black business owners to look around Black residential areas. Look around at the wreckage of most businesses that tried to do business in Black residential areas as visibly Black-owned businesses. You're not the first aspiring Black business owner who daydreamed of serving Black consumers. Other Black business owners had that dream and failed. Next section, their actions show that most African American consumers don't want Black-owned businesses to exist. There are reasons there are few visibly Black-owned and operated businesses within the African American collective. The primary reason is that African American consumers don't want to see visibly Black-owned businesses succeed. They don't want to, and for the most part won't, patronize visibly Black-owned businesses. The only partial exceptions to this rule were African American owned hair salons and barbershops. Don't be deceived by the many, many lies African American consumers tell about their motivations. Actions speak much louder than words. Look at African American consumers' collective actions. The harsh reality is that African American consumer decisions are not motivated by considerations of quality or customer service. Next section, if African American consumers cared about quality or service, they would not persist in patronizing Arab and Korean-owned stores. If African American consumers cared about quality or service, then they would not be jam-packed into Arab and Korean-owned stores that exist in Black residential areas. Black consumers will continue shopping in Arab-owned stores even after learning that the shopkeeper allows Black gang members to sell drugs outside the back. Even after learning the shopkeeper is exchanging groceries for sexual favors. Even after learning the shopkeeper is sexually harassing underage Black girls in the store. As demonstrated by the sad case of Latasha Harlins, African American consumers will continue flocking to Korean-owned stores even after a Black child is unjustly shot in the back of the head and killed by a Korean shopkeeper. Most African American consumers don't care about quality, customer service, or anything else. Those are just the excuses they give for not supporting Black-owned businesses. Most of them are lying. Other motivations form the backdrop of their buying decisions. One of the many unfortunate unintended consequences of the civil rights movement is that it reinforced the African American perception that shopping with non-blacks equals freedom, acceptance, and progress. So most African Americans get an emotional high from shopping with non-blacks. We'll even fight with non-black others to make them take our money. It makes many African Americans feel free to have their money accepted by non-black others. They don't get any emotional satisfaction from patronizing their own people's businesses. Next section, pay attention to the elephants in the room, the parallels with dishonest black love conversations. I usually refuse to engage in how to have or save black businesses conversations with people who are not engaged in business activities themselves. I typically refuse to engage in that sort of conversation for the same reason I refuse to engage black men in the if black women would only do X, Y, and Z, then more black men would want to marry them conversation. I firmly believe that both of these types of conversations are fundamentally dishonest because the underlying premises are untrue. In the business context, I believe that this false premise is about denial of how slave-minded most of us are and wishful thinking about the true nature and motivations of African American consumers. Next section, Black loves double standards. Black men will happily marry non-black women that have all the traits that they claim to find so off-putting about many black women: obesity, difficult personalities, and so on. Masses of black women could twist themselves into pretzels physically, emotionally, and spiritually to try to cater to African American males, and the bulk of these males would still not marry a black woman. They'll have sex with and impregnate black women, but not marry them. Also, many of these males would still choose non-black women whenever they get the opportunity. African American women are the only resource that African American men control. They have nothing else. Many black men will be in trouble if more African American women start imitating black men by doing whatever works best for them, without worrying about the so-called community or black love. Consequently, the true underlying purpose of most black love conversations is to keep black women's money, time, energy, attention, and efforts solely focused on supporting black men and their issues, which are redefined as overall black community issues. All while black men continue wandering off to do whatever they want to do without considering how their choices affect the so-called community. Black consumers' double standards. Similarly, African American consumers will happily shop in non-black owned businesses that possess all the traits that they claim to find so off-putting about black owned businesses: rude service, goods that cost 2 cents more than rock bottom prices, untidy stores, lack of selection, and so on. There's a similar dynamic with many of the African American consumers who engage in how to have or save black businesses conversations. Black business owners could spend their last dollar twisting themselves and their businesses into having the aura and presentation of the jewelers at Cartier, and most African American consumers would still continue their informal boycott of black businesses. African American consumers would still choose to shop with non-blacks whenever they get the opportunity. When you look at the overall behavior pattern, it is an undeclared boycott of African American businesses by African American consumers. When African American consumers get off into dishonest, hypothetical, how to have and save black businesses suggestions, many of them subconsciously want to see black business owners fail and lose their money. That's why they give such reality-defying, expensive, and futile advice to aspiring black business owners. Underneath it all, they want the black business under discussion to flop. Black business owners taking business advice from most African American consumers is as foolish and dangerous as black women taking relationship advice from black men. In both cases, most of the people dishing out the advice don't have the listener's best interests in heart. There's much mutual hateration among African Americans. Most African Americans hate and resent black people with any money. We're famous for being crabs in a barrel who don't want to see another African American prosper. We're only comfortable with a narrow category of African Americans having wealth, the often semi-literate blacks who are drug dealers, throwing balls around sports fields, or cursing on a microphone over some beats. These are the wealthy blacks that we idolize. As an aspiring black business owner, there are some things you need to recognize. If you're a black person whose money comes from activities other than the above, then many of us will resent you. We have a level of envy and hateration for you that we don't feel for non-black business owners. No matter how badly these non-black business owners treat us, we'll just find another non-black business to patronize. We certainly don't want to see you prosper, and we're not going to knowingly support your economic activities. We give lip service and nothing else in support of the black person who studied and built a legitimate business to get their money. Besides the secretly want you to fail black consumers who have a long laundry list of demands for black businesses, there are the black wishful thinkers who want to believe that most African American consumers are rational actors. These naive individuals project their own rational consumer behavior onto the masses of African Americans. They like to believe that these irrational black consumer double standards are ghetto issues. They're not. This attitude extends across class boundaries. The African American professional who would not be caught dead shopping in some slum, Korean, or Arab store is typically somebody who, just like the black poor, also does not patronize black businesses, nor do they hire black professionals for any of their needs. Somehow, everybody these middle-class African Americans use is non-black, from their doctor to their dentist to their tax person to their real estate broker to their insurance agent, and so on. There's only one difference between the middle-class African American consumers' unspoken boycott of black businesses and the poor African American consumers' unspoken boycott of black businesses. That is the level of sophistication involved in their rationalization for their behavior. Dysfunctions are easier to spot with the black poor and underclass because they often lack the polish to explain them away effectively. Next section, the price of denial and complacency. I'm always amazed by the human mind's capacity for denying reality. I understand the human urge to keep hope alive and desperately search for exceptions to painful rules. The problem is that taking this posture usually costs more in the end. As unpleasant as it can be, in the long run, it's usually best to face harsh realities and act accordingly. Next section, consider what denial and complacency about black love did for Caribbean origin black women in the United Kingdom. Whenever these sorts of topics come up, there's always the chorus of voices claiming that there's no need for alarm or to rethink previous assumptions and behavior patterns because things aren't that bad. During black love conversations, there are always those voices reassuring black women that most married African American men have black wives, and that only a small percentage of African American men are married to non-black women. What these soothing voices of complacency don't mention is that the statistics they cite aren't counting the African American men who are not married, but are shacked up with non-black women, or those black men who exclusively date non-black women. These voices of complacency will continue singing their lullabies even as the African American out-of-wedlock birth rate eventually reaches 90 to 95%. From the comments and essays I've read by Caribbean origin British black women, bloggers, and readers, I get the impression that women in their communities in the UK were lulled into denial and complacency as similar trends developed. Well, now, they're at the point that West Indian black men's interracial relationship rate in the UK has reached 48%. I believe the UK situation is a sneak preview of how African American men will continue their singular focus on seeking their own individual bliss, while the deceived masses of black women in the US keep trying to uphold black love and the black family, all by themselves. If you want to succeed, you can't afford to live in similar denial as a black business owner. In that spirit, you need to understand the following. Black residential areas already have the businesses that African American consumers are willing to sustain. These businesses are owned by the people these consumers are willing to see prosper. African Americans have an informal tradition of buying what they want and begging for what they need. The unflattering truth is that black residential areas already have the businesses that African American consumers are actually willing to support. No more, no less. And those businesses are owned by the people that they are actually willing to see prosper, and nobody else. If something doesn't exist in a black residential area, such as independent mom and pop owned bakeries or decent sit down restaurants, it's because African American consumers are not willing to sustain having that particular thing in their midst. It's not about poverty. Equally poor Latino neighborhoods generally have independent mom and pop owned bakeries or decent sit down restaurants. Don't buy the snake oil. For an aspiring African American business owner, buying into that if only more African American owned and operated businesses would do X, Y, and Z, then more black consumers would patronize Black-owned businesses. Delusion will typically lead to that Black business owner's financial ruin. I've seen this happen more than once to naive African American business owners who mistakenly believed that African American consumer decisions were about quality. I'm talking about quality Black businesses in middle class and working class Black residential areas, not dives and slums. Over the years, I've seen several bakeries go under, a bridal dress store, several bookstores, a printer copy shop, and so on, as well as a lack of support. There were constant break-ins, and so these businesses died. I firmly believe the owners would have had a much better chance if they had set up shop in non-Black neighborhoods and pretended the owner was white. This is part of what I mean by having a colorless business. African American consumers' statements can't be taken at face value. Their actions show that they don't want what they claim to want, and their motivations for supporting or not supporting various businesses are not what they say they are. I'm not buying into or peddling that snake oil. I'm not trying to destroy aspiring African Americans' businesses before they even start, which is the end result of entertaining this. If only more African American owned and operated businesses would do X, Y, and Z, then more Black consumers would patronize Black owned businesses delusion. This is why I generally refuse to engage in how to have or save Black businesses conversations with people who are not engaged in business activities themselves. Last segment. If you want to maximize your odds of success, leave most African American consumers behind. Again, it's interesting to note the parallels between the dilemmas faced by Black business owners and that of marriage-minded African American women. As mentioned on this blog's FAQ page, Black women who are serious about marriage need to expand their dating and marriage prospects to include men from the wider world and not limit themselves to dating Black men. A marriage-minded Black woman needs to position herself so a large pool of quality men, including non-Black men, can find her. In a similar manner, Black business owners who are serious about success need to stop structuring their businesses around hopes of appealing to African American consumers. The masses of African American consumers are emotionally incapable of responding appropriately to any visibly Black-owned business, regardless of its quality. African American business owners need to position their businesses as colorless in order to tap into the larger pool of non-Black consumers. Leave the deranged masses of African American consumers behind. Don't worry about excluding Black consumers. Most of them would never support your business anyway. Meanwhile, just like other consumers, the handful of healthy African American consumers will run across your colorless business while shopping in the mainstream and respond appropriately. So that article hurts. It hurts to know that mentality is out there, but you know, it hurts even more to read it and have to nod your head and say, yep, that fits. Man, yep, that too. Because that is the reality that we don't want to face, is that Black people will find every possible excuse to not shop at a Black-owned business or not do business with a Black professional. And, you know, we are our own biggest downfall. You know, nothing about this podcast or this platform is about only buy from Black businesses. Because I know right now we don't have enough Black businesses in our different communities to support all the needs that anyone would have. But it is about look for Black-owned businesses who you can support. And when they're put in front of you, if a company has a product or service that could add value to your life, then give that company a try. Give them a chance. And if you get good service and you get a good product, tell somebody else about them. Try to support our businesses, right? Not every business is for everybody, but you won't know until you try. And that's what this platform is all about. Our Black-owned businesses don't get the exposure that other businesses get to the community. So this platform is about creating more exposure. But as you're listening, if you are in the audience and you, whether you own a business or don't own a business, whether you're, you know, Black, white, brown, yellow, red, whatever color in between, if you hear one of my guests talking about their business and they've got a product or a service that fits your need, reach out to them and buy from them. The absolute worst thing that could happen is you don't get the best experience in the world that you ever had with a business. But the best thing that could happen is you have the absolute best experience that you've ever had working with a business. You get a product that's unique, that you've not found anywhere else in the market, that meets your exact need, and whatever's in between that best and worst is more likely to be closer to the best side. So I guess the thing that sticks with me out of all of this is, our reality in the United States is that we have been so deeply ingrained with a self-destructive mentality that it's just normal for us. It's foreign to think that the first business I should go try to find to support is a Black-owned business. It's foreign to think that, but that's only foreign to us. There's no other demographic who finds it strange to support a business owned by somebody in their community first. And yet for us, how many different websites are out there now, right? You got We Buy Black and all these other Black-owned business directories. I'm eventually going to get my website up where I want to have a Black-owned business directory. We're constantly trying to put together directories because we keep telling ourselves if only Black people could find us, then they would definitely support us. But it's not that simple, is it? It's not that easy as just putting a directory out there because people just didn't know how to find them. Man, that's frustrating. But that's part of the process, right? So I'm getting in my own head right now, thinking about my process and what I'm trying to build here. I think the podcast is a perfect answer because it wasn't out there it wasn't out there before. This is the first podcast like this, and I love the interviews. I love promoting Black-owned businesses. I love the new friends that I'm making every time I get to sit down and talk to somebody, and we connect on Facebook afterwards, and we continue providing support and sharing for each other, and giving referrals between businesses. I love that. I love the networking aspect of doing this podcast and meeting new people and finding new Black-owned businesses who I can funnel people towards. I love that. But as I am looking at what it's going to take to go forward and actually make a real difference, I think I'm at a point where I'm realizing that all of this was my idea, but I didn't ask any questions of the business owners who are out there about what it is that you feel like you're missing, what it is that you feel would work best to support your business. I just assumed it was a directory, but there are plenty of directories out there, and there are more getting sprung up every day. So maybe it's time for me to listen. That's where I'm at now. Podcast, I think it's great. You guys are giving me great feedback, so I think we're on track with that. But I want to close this episode out, having put all this heavy stuff out here. Trust me, guys, I'm still in a good mood, but this is, a little bit of heavy stuff. But I want to close this episode out by talking to the business owners who are in the audience. I want to ask you guys a couple of questions. I want to get your input into what it is that you feel like you're being challenged with out there in the marketplace, and what I can do best for you. What thing are you missing? What thing is keeping you up at night? What are the pain points? What are the things you wish you had? I don't know how to ask the question, but I guess I'll ask the questions that I wrote them down. So one thing is, I've been thinking about creating a platform that's for Black business owners only, right? No consumers. It's not a place for you to promote your business. It's not a place where you're going to have all these other prying eyes. It would just be a closed platform for verified Black business owners where you could just connect with each other, ask the questions that you want to ask, get advice, get support, get referrals to other businesses, like, for accounting or anything like that. Just a place where you can, I always want to say a safe place where it's just Black business owners and nobody else, and you can just kind of freely talk to each other and share and connect. So I've been thinking about that idea. I would love to get your feedback on that. The other question that I want to ask, and we'll just keep it simple, all right? King for a day, queen for a day. Money's no object. What would this platform do for you? Okay? If you were king for a day, queen for a day, money was no object, if there was anything that I could build for you that would meet your exact needs and help you as a business owner, what would that thing be? Toss me that feedback. Toss me the answers to those questions. send them to me in my email. It's the easiest way to get in touch with me. My email, gjones@buyblackpodcast.com. That is gjones@buyblackpodcast.com. Shoot me those questions. Shoot me those responses there. And aside from that, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. I think I've been going for a while, and then we put out a lot of good content today. Last thing before I close it out. Oh, this is a very important thing too. Really exciting. So I've been having an app built for the Apple operating system and for Android. The Android is not out yet, but the Buy Black Podcast app is live in the Apple App Store. So for anybody who you've been downloading the shows on Facebook or off of the Twitter posts or from Instagram or wherever it might be, or if you just kind of wait for it to show up on the website, this is a way for you to skip all of that and to just get updates whenever a new episode gets posted right there on your phone. If you got an iPhone, if you got an Apple product, iPhone, iPad, whatever, you go to the Apple App Store. If you search Buy Black Wall Street, so it's Buy Black and then a hyphen, Black Wall Street, I'm guessing because they had to shorten the name of it to fit within their constraints, whatever, it doesn't matter, I don't care. Buy Black Wall Street, you will find the app for the Buy Black Podcast. You download that app, you have it right there on your phone, and then you'll get updates. Every time a new episode comes out, you'll get them right to your phone. You don't have to go anywhere, download anything. It's all going to be super simple. I've already had a few people download the app, tell me that, hey, it's laid out easy, the settings are easy to modify, and the downloads are quick and simple. So this is a major breakthrough for me on this podcast. I would love for you to help me continue to grow the audience. If you talk to anybody about Buy Black Podcast, instead of trying to send them to different links, just tell them, hey, go to the App Store and download Buy Black Wall Street, and they'll get the show right there on their phone. Also, as with the podcast, same thing with the app. If you download the app, you like the way that it works, everything's nice and smooth, please go in and give it a 5-star rating and give me a review for the show. That really helps to fit in Apple's algorithms and kind of move the show up in the responses when people do their search, so that we can reach more ears, get this message out to a broader audience, and hopefully have the global impact that we envision for building up our economic success as a community. But with that said, thanks so much for listening in with me on this episode. You guys have a wonderful week, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you for being part of the Buy Black Podcast community. If you're enjoying the show, I'd appreciate reading your 5-star review in iTunes. Join us next time for another empowering episode.